A wonderful good afternoon, lady and gentlemen, and everybody who's following us online. It's day 2 of our International Scientific Conference. It's about people za človeka gre. And you're one of the 2 sessions that are taking place in a hybrid mode today. So we're really, really happy to have all of you here, especially our keynote from yesterday, Professor Granov. Hello, Professor Mainzer. I'm glad you made it back home and that you're following us this time online. As, of course, esteemed guests, welcome to Alma Mater Europaea University. We are the youngest university in Slovenia. We were just founded as a university 2 years ago. But other than that, we are expecting the 18th generation of students that will start in October 2026. So for those of you who don't know us, we, at the moment, offer 24 study programs at all 3 Bologna cycles. We have 5 centers in Slovenia. The headquarters is here in Maribor. And 2 years ago, we started with Vienna in Austria as one of our campi. And we are adding Villach to that as well for health sciences. Our areas of expertise cover everything from humanities, where your section was placed, to health sciences, archival sciences, management, social gerontology, applied artificial intelligence. And we're really, really happy to have assembled such a nice, important group of people. Not to forget also the World Academy of Art and Science. Thank you, Donata, for still being with us, the Vice President. For all questions you might have, Miha, our IT support, is there. He will help you out. You might have noticed there's a camera. We call it the owl because it turns around and you will be able to monitor, to also follow everything on the screen. And if anybody has a PowerPoint presentation you want to share, just let Miha know. He will upload it. He will share it with everybody. For our online audience, if you want to speak up, of course, you will have to unmute yourself, but everything else will be moderated by our dear guest, Professor Howie Firth from Orkney. Welcome to the South. All right. And if there's anything else, Assistant Professor Daniel Sitter will be with you as well. He knows where things are around here. And I'm passing the word on to you. Have a wonderful session. And again, welcome to Maribor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tanya, for that very kind introduction. And huge thank you to Alma Mater Europaea University for such wonderful hospitality. And we're going to start, in fact, with some introductory and welcoming words from Andraž Ivšek, who's the head of international relations at the Slovenian Science Foundation. Welcome, Andraž.
Thank you, Javi. Dear colleagues, academics, scientists, artists, thinkers, students, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a very special time. We could also call it a time of paradoxes. We have access to vast amount of knowledge, more than at any time in human history. And yet it seems that in this abundance of information, we have lost our compasses and do not know where to go. The progress of science is outpacing our wisdom, and as can be seen, the ability of technology is already a few steps ahead in our moral judgment. We could say that as a civilization, we are dangerously approaching to the point at which we feel the danger of almost forgetting our purpose. That is also why we're here today. We do not want to be passive observers of the crisis that is felt all over the world, but rather those who are looking for an answer. One of those answers could be called the New Renaissance. The great Renaissance humanist Pico della Mirandola wrote more than 500 years ago that a man can ascend to the heights where divine resides or fall into the depths that lie lower than animals. And today, in this freedom of choice, is even more urgent. The global challenges of the world, such as the uncertainty of the solution of the environmental crisis, the burning geopolitical tensions, and increasingly the ethical challenges brought about by growing greed and artificial intelligence, cannot be solved in isolation. They cannot be solved, for example, only by the rapid development of technologies. The answer to these problems can only be found in a comprehensive transformation of society. The new Renaissance is not a mirror of the past, but it is a decisive response above all to the problems that the world is facing and that we will face even more intensely in our future. Only with a conscious decisions we can choose light instead of darkness, or instead of chaos in the current world, we choose wisdom, and instead of apathy, solutions that are prospective, ethical, and sustainable. The effort of humanity crystallized in science can only provide an answer if a man is truly committed to curiosity and responsibility. Only the freedom of research provides a solid foundation for progress. However, as we have seen from experience, freedom of research is not enough. We also need the freedom to exchange knowledge as one of the most valuable of the capitals of humanity. When we read about so-called fifth freedom, which is an expression for the free flow of excellent knowledge and researchers, we break down those walls behind which science is hidden for the interests of various powers. Science must serve man and not vice versa. This can only be achieved by making it not to remain in the laboratories and institutions or in the rooms of academies, by accessible to every citizen and becoming a way to achieve prosperity for us all. In the current world, which is the result of geopolitical interests, increasingly strong antagonists are felt. There is too little will to quickly and diplomatically end the wars that are increasing in number. In resolving such complex crises, the soft power represented by scientific and cultural diplomacy is becoming more and more important. The global peace offensive, which the World Academy of Arts and Sciences and the European Academy of Arts and Sciences will present at this event, it's not just theoretical concept, it's proactive peacemaking. We are at the point where history does not just repeat itself, but what is much more worrying, it's repeating faster and faster. Academies can become effective actors in achieving peace. With an enhanced dialogue, scientists, artists, thinkers could influence the quality of political decision-making. Thus, through strategic de-escalation, the necessary trust can be built. When we connect humanistic understanding with scientific evidence, we effectively prevent global conflicts before they escalate into violence and war. In this case, peace is civilizational choice and not the absence of war. How to present the new Renaissance that is not just one of many good ideas, but as an urgent and promising concept for raising social consciousness and solving the global crisis. We can see that our brains are constantly bombarded with information. Decision makers who want to categorize solutions at high speed are becoming a great threat to our future. We need to offer a broader view of the current situation so that we can find solutions efficiently and quickly. It sounds strange that we are also talking about the beauty on the scientific conference. The Renaissance was not only rediscovery or discovery of printing and the scientific method. It was above all the rebirth of human spirit. Marsilio Ficino imagined a world in harmony, connected by love and beauty. We must revive those two and other Renaissance values as a renewed paradigm on which we will shape policies and social perspectives. Sustainable Europe and world cannot exist without macroeconomic model that doesn't include human dignity. For now, we do not know of any external saviors, but we are the only one responsible for the future of our children and grandchildren. We must place science and art at the very center of public life, and by doing so, we can raise human consciousness and spirit. Science without ethics can lead us fast into abuse. So why don't we start today with a clear view of our future? The new Renaissance offers sustainable and efficient solutions. Or to paraphrase the French philosopher Henri de Lubac, let the new Renaissance shine quietly and courageously and spread over our planet like a dawn of a new day. Think deeply, act ethically, lead courageously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andraj. That is fascinating. That gives us a beautiful overview. And indeed, it leads to the first of the questions we'll be discussing this afternoon about the big global problems. And sometimes it seems that world leaders have found huge problems like climate change to be just too big for them to tackle. And so instead, they have turned to fight each other like rival football supporters. And the question is, could there be something in the very nature of these big global problems that makes them so difficult? Could they be so interlocked that the traditional way of tackling each one in isolation doesn't work? Should we stand back and seek a completely fresh approach? Well, these questions have long been a concern for Dr. Daria Pitziga. She's a long-time researcher in the field of the Knowledge Society and a sustainability expert in the government sector. She's now a member of the Centre for Emeritus Professors and Retired Higher Education Teachers of the University of Maribor. She also chairs the Centre's Working Group for Environmental Protection. At the same time, she's continuing her long-term work with the Citizens Initiative for an Integral Green Slovenia. And it's this integral approach, bringing together environmental issues with economic and also cultural ones, that she's now going to describe.
Good afternoon to all. I will speak about an integral green Europe as a way to honor and renew the Renaissance spirit through integrating perspectives and potentials on a path of sustainability. The figure on the left has been created some 15 years ago and is becoming increasingly relevant. Today, more than ever, we can conclude that our world is out of balance. Imbalances are taking place on a larger scale with increased intensity, interdependency, and complexity. This complexity makes us confused, since the cognitive maps we possess, composed of compartmentalized knowledge, are no longer adequate for coping with the challenges of today. Intellectual life during the original Renaissance made great contributions by laying the groundwork for modern disciplines. However, the burning issues of the 21st century, with multiple crises in Europe and neighboring regions, require a different complementary approach, integration of knowledge and wisdom. We are dealing with a new paradigm that cannot be explained in 9 minutes. I have therefore prepared a longer presentation intended to help you delve deeper into the integral words paradigm later and potentially for consideration during today's discussion. Awareness of urgent need for more integrated holistic systemic approaches to overcome the conventional silo thinking and doing is growing in the context of sustainable development debates and policy planning. Pope Francis has also recognized this. On the other hand, an integral age is emerging largely unconnected to the global sustainability movement framed by the institutional UN processes. A number of integral approaches, many originating in Europe, helped shift the global perspective to a more integral view over the past 200 years, among others Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy and Transform's integral worlds. Here is the integral world generic design from the book Integral Development. The integral paradigm by Lesem and Schiffer is a transcultural and transdisciplinary conceptual framework and process, building developmental models on specific culture of each individual society. It emphasizes dynamic balance among the integrating integrating and inspiring center, often fundamental values, the moral core, and 4 mutually reinforcing dimensions or realms, nature and community south, culture and consciousness or spirituality east, science, systems, and knowledge and technology north, and economy, enterprise, or finance and politics west. The inner core and the outer circle are connected through 4 R's, explained on the next slide. And with integral words, we incorporate the transcultural context, recognizing alternative world views. It is transdisciplinary, intersectoral, it is transformative and transpersonal. A few words about this integral transcultural approach. It integrates perspectives and wisdom of different cultures, while the original Renaissance built and favored European culture and worldview. An example for the Southern realm, nature and community. The Ubuntu philosophy that can be in a simplified way expressed as, I am because you are, I am because we are. A powerful story. An anthropologist proposed a game to children in an African tribe. He put a basket of sweet fruits near a tree and told the children whoever got there first won the sweet fruits. And what they did? When he told them to run, they all took each other's hands and ran together, then sat together enjoying their treats. And they answered to the anthropologist, Ubuntu. How can one of us be happy if all the others are sad? European societies and communities need to find Ubuntu in their cultural heritage and modern practices and more intentionally promote it. While the original Renaissance witnessed the beginnings of free market capitalism and modern banking, today we need to integrate different sustainable economic paths with their theoretical and practical contributions as alternatives to the prevailing neoliberal capitalism. The model on the left presents integral economic map with 4 paths: community-based self-sufficiency, developmental culture-based economy, social knowledge-based economy, and living life-based economy with, for example, well-being economics and sustainable enterprise. On the right, seminal models of integral economy are depicted with 2 from Europe: Mondragon, the global icon of cooperativism, and the leading sustainable bank, Triodos. Within the framework of Integral Slovenia initiative and in cooperation with Schiffer and Lesem, we applied both models, the integral worlds and the integral economy. In 2016, we published the Integral Green Slovenia book and later started to develop the Integral Green Europe model that is presented in the following 2 slides. The proposal for an Integral Green Europe smartly integrates the many EU potentials for SD from our cultural heritage to new initiatives and policies supported by key EU policies and institutions. I would like to highlight the European Green Deal, supporting, among others, the social economy and circular economy, the European Sustainability Competence Framework, GreenComp, and the knowledge base by the European Environment Agency reports. This figure presents still incomplete account of European potentials. We can explore them during the discussion later. The vision of an integral green Europe needs to fully embrace the 17 SDGs and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The 2050 vision can therefore be formulated as well-being, good life for all, and well-preserved, healthy natural environment. The vision is further elaborated with ambitious targets for all 4 economic paths. For example, EU as the leading world region for green economy. We have introduced a new concept of smart integration of EU policies for sustainable development, complementary to smart specialization, and explained on this slide. In the Integral Green Slovenia book, we described how the smart integration is already happening in practice. A more recent example of smart integration on policy level is presenting in the following 5 slides. I propose to embrace the Green Comp Sustainability Competence Framework and to use the wealth of knowledge of the European Environment Agency for developing these competencies. Here are some important concepts and a short summary of the latest EA report on the Europe's environment. I linked the ecosystems model of development by EA to Green Comp competencies. One more example, we don't have time to explore it. And to conclude, the integral world's paradigm can inform our endeavors for sustainability in a Renaissance mode by placing fundamental values underlying the European cultural heritage in the center. By rooting sustainable development in nature and community and including culture of the particular society, authentically building on European cultures, as well as recognizing contributions of other cultures. By revisiting the economic paradigm as already presented, by connecting and upgrading a number of European integral green practices, hoping for an integral green Slovenia to become a pilot country, by smart integration and effective implementation of EU developmental policies for sustainability, and last but not least, by helping Europe to become aware that integral age and societal renaissance are emerging in other cultures too, and to support such integral impulses in developing countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Daria. Some fascinating points there, starting with the idea that the various crises we face are all interlocked, and therefore a solution has got to be found that links all of them. And it's very interesting how your solution there brings in nature, culture, and communities. These are all issues that we'll be referring to again with other speakers. But now we're seeing a big new challenge, several big new challenges coming forward, but one of them in the news very much is, of course, artificial intelligence. Companies say it's a wonderful thing as they can make money out of replacing staff by machines. Governments say this must also be a good thing because somehow if companies make money, it somehow helps us all, even if the governments have to pick up the unemployment bill for all the people made redundant by the machines. But our next speaker points out, in fact, that the success of AI highlights a big gap in education. It's not a technical one, it's long been neglected, but now with the growth of AI, it's going to need urgent attention. Dr. Samuel Abraham is the rector of the Bratislava International School of Liberal Education, BISLA for short, which he founded 20 years ago. He's also the founder of the European Network of Liberal Art Schools and Programs. So Samuel, it's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Howie. Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to tell right from beginning, I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence, so bear with me, and that's why I attempt to talk about education in 22nd century, because probably no one will catch me that I was wrong. And if someone was born today and then will live in 100 years, I think his or her concern would be something else than checking my paper today. But evidently, artificial intelligence is arguably the most radical technological revolution, dwarfing all previous ones. Steam engine, electricity, aviation, computer technology, even nuclear fission, because all these under careful and responsible human supervision can be controlled. Whereas with artificial intelligence, the threat is that it can get out of hand. My previous speaker mentioned that world out of balance. Actually, Philip Glass there was a movie, Koyaanisqatsi, which meant actually in African, the world out of balance. And so that might be something that what is most threatening. And then you all heard about artificial general intelligence, which is that in some parts, the artificial intelligence will surpass the human capacity. And there's a new term, artificial superintelligence, which is that artificial intelligence will surpass human beings in every aspect. And so once that would happen, what would be the point for education? Where would we be at that point? Now, the debate today is so we are bombarded with all kinds of information, self-appointed prophets, technicians. They talk about doomsday. They talk about the great achievements in medicine and so on. And so I will avoid to discuss that element. What I wish to talk, what could be the role of education in 100 years, or at the moment when the world will be in the status of that artificial superintelligence, where machine will be superior in everything what humanity does. Is there any space for education at all? I start actually with the following premise. And bear with me, this is very important. If we do not know what artificial intelligence can do, or what will end up doing, we can deduct what artificial intelligence cannot and will not do. Whatever it will master, whatever the artificial intelligence will achieve, it will not have an influence on the moral outlook of the individual human being. Even if AI may replace all the technical fields, all the pilots and engineers and architects and lawyers, who that would be actually a good part, master all skills, it will not instill human being with a moral and ethical disposition. You can do anything, you can learn, you can read, but even a sophisticated rascal can know Plato by heart, and it doesn't help. So the education comes to prominence in this respect. And that's what I want to dwell on. So let's do kind of a thought experiment about education in 100 years. What in 100 years will still stay from today? What will prevail? What we will still have here in that maybe barren land and landscape? What will excite, depress, enlighten human beings, young and old, in the age of AGI and ACI? Now, of course, unless we have some kind of nuclear disaster, and then we are back into hunters-gatherer trying to create a static electricity to start a fire. But unless there is no nuclear disaster, I have 4 proposals what we can study about the possibility what can happen in the future. I'll discuss very briefly 4 things. What political forces might still prevail in 100 years? Can history teach us? And then there we come to Renaissance, of course, while shaping the education. Or now, if the current condition what university offer, the big research university offer, teaching the technical school, teaching lawyers, teaching doctors, can they sustain themselves in 100 years if all these major jobs will be done by the machines? Another point, if there is any education, what it would be that meaningful education in the future? What knowledge and skill would young people still require in the future? And finally, the 4th point, and that's my cottage industry thing, liberal arts. What is the role of responsibility of liberal arts education today to connect its moral and ethical goals derived from the past with the same goal that education should provide in the future? Because implicit goal of liberal education is not only to teach philosophy and read literature, but hope that the students will become a better human being, that he or she will also improve his or her character. It's not automatic. It's not at all automatic, as we know from Cardinal Newman, that liberal education creates gentlemen, not the good human beings. But we hope, and that's that we have to hope that it would happen. I'll go very fast. What will be still present? I recommend a book by Conor Cruz O'Brien, On the Eve of the Million, from 1994. Very good. He says nationalism and religion will prevail, even in 500 years, when we'll have a most sophisticated world, because they have emotional attraction. The desperate people would need something tangible to relate to each other. He's much less hopeful for Enlightenment tradition, and particularly liberal democracy. And we could discuss that point because it's very fascinating. And we can see that demography and migration is already undermining liberal democracy. And these are the first signs of it. I cannot avoid not to mention that as everything, every invention, there are lots of people who would want to make money and misuse and get power. So artificial intelligence will be misused, and somehow people are not paying attention. That's incredible. I would talk for hours about three major historical periods that deal with major social changes: ancient Greece, Renaissance, and Enlightenment. And I'll just mention two things. They all deal with education. You cannot see Renaissance, ancient Greece, Socrates without actually talking about education. And all three were started with a small group of people. And none of those individuals thought that they are changing the paradigm. They're shifting the paradigm needle. And that's why it's worth discussing the new Renaissance today as well. We know that education was preserved from the early universities starting in the 11th century. And we know that Socrates' dilemma facing Callicles and Thrasymachus in Gorgias and the Republic was that how to navigate the eras of the young people who are passionate, who power hungry, and then how to navigate in the right direction. Because if we don't do, they'll destroy us, because they will become the Machiavellis of the future. If we look at the education today, the major university, they offer narrow subjects. They also look down upon humanities, and they say that, well, these are outdated. We don't need them anymore because they don't get you a job. So actually this business model or major research university is heading to total obsolescence. And we know that universities are a very conservative institution. It will be very difficult for them to change. Now, what could be an education for 22nd century? I say that liberal arts, spoiler alert, education towards decency, shaping of a good character was and is and will be the crucial aspects of education during 22nd century, and perhaps more so today than at any time in the future. And liberal arts, the same as Bildung in 19th century Germany, have to do everything to keep it alive. Now, the thing is, as major universities are looking down and politicians are not financing and pushing it out, if liberal arts might be the education for the future, our responsibility is to preserve it today, because if it's pushed away, there's nothing to recover in 100 years from the liberal arts education. So our responsibility is more than ever to keep it alive today, spread it as much as possible, provide the education. And it's not education only in the arts. It's about debates, about reading, about discussing the most important issue of today in an open manner and not kind of a politically correct way. And then so this is very important that we preserve the liberal arts for the future, for the sake of the future, not only for us who are doing the liberal arts. And then so I will conclude. Hence, good education today is the connector or bond between the past and the future. Our responsibility is to preserve that connection today. It would allow the young people of the 22nd century to live meaningful lives instead of dystopia under thumb or artificial superintelligence. Thank you. 10 minutes, sorry.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed, Sammy. Absolutely fascinating to see that with the challenge of rushing into the future with artificial intelligence, we should actually look back into the past for what makes us strongest: character, values, attitude, ethics, and models. Thank you very much indeed. And now comes the question of how would we apply that same approach from the past, from the Renaissance, to our world situation today? Dr. Igor Shkamperle is a sociologist and writer who's gone deeply into the roots of the Renaissance and into the thinking of some of the key people who brought it about and their roles in the development of religion and of science. He's a professor of sociology at the University of Ljubljana. His text is read by Peter Velasco, who has done so much to make possible the development of discussion towards a new Renaissance. Peter.
Well, thank you very much, Howie. First of all, dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored that I am able to present the presentation of my dear colleague, Dr. Igor Shkamperle from the University of Ljubljana. And not to lose too much time, we will talk about the crisis of the modern world and possible paths of renewal or Renaissance today. So obviously, Western civilization is in crisis, and its decline does not only concern 100 years after Spengler, the European and Western spheres, but also affects humanity in general and raises the question of how to shape a planetary consciousness, a form of consciousness that will transcend the traditional spheres of interest of national identities and will cope with the challenges imposed on us by modern technology and inefficient systems of government we are facing today. As free-thinking people, actually, which is one of the most precious values of European culture, we are not satisfied with just observing and stating the situation, but we want to contribute with thought and words to finding solutions for the unfavorable situation we are all in. Europe, the West, the world, and Renaissance humanism. Actually, how is it possible to think about the future? Technological and social innovations are so rapid today that it is impossible to predict how humanity will develop in the coming decades. Even institutions that deal with this, such as the, for instance, Italian Institute for the Future, do not have clear conclusions and limit themselves to signaling trends. For our part, we refer to the European Renaissance as a historical period that can help us understand the contemporary situation of society and men. Why the Renaissance? Reference to the historical Renaissance, to its rich cultural and social dynamics, with which the new age was formed in the 16th century, and the impulses of planetary consciousness were born in the beginning, then as today, in a conflicting form, reference to the then and still relevant humanistic ideas, can be a good incentive to find forms that would address modern men and contribute to raising human consciousness to the planetary level. However, not with the aim of expanding and establishing a new ideology, but on the basis of the principle of a new planetary social and co-natural responsibility. Once again, why the Renaissance? The era of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Dürer, Erasmus of Rotterdam, Thomas More, and Cervantes is of course distant, and our problems today are very different. Nevertheless, the connection to the Renaissance makes sense because we are connected to that period by some internal structural affinities that act as a mental and social challenge to which we cannot find the right answer either then or today. I see our task, therefore, as how to act so that the mature, dignified day, worthy of a planetary and cosmic man, emerges from the Renaissance morning. I will list some internal structural affinities. Before that, let me explain my ideological and methodological starting point. I argue that numerous major transformations of modern society in the 20th century, together or in intertwining and interdependence with technical achievements, were primarily transformations of the imagination. This manifests itself on an individual and collective level. Historical narratives rely on descriptions of important events such as wars, social conflicts, conquests, technical innovations, and great cultural creations. The basis and legitimation of these events were forms of collective imagination. Fascism, National Socialism, communism, as well as Marxist secular eschatology are great ideological formations that have fermented the collective imagination of the European and also the world population in the 20th century. Something similar is happening to us today. The new technical paradigm and forms of communications are directing a great collective transformation of the social imagination to which we are direct witnesses. My thesis is that today, in the transition from a bipolar or monopoly world to a multipolar planetary society, a broader paradigm shift is being manifested in conflicting forms, manifested by contemporary forms of imagination. The transition from real reality to virtual, from analog to digital, from human to post-human in the form of artificial intelligence, from democratic sovereignty to a controlled society, from individual freedom to greater adaptability and herd or tribal mentality. At this level, a connection or even a comparison with the ideas and culture of the Renaissance suggests itself. Social thinkers, Edgar Morin, Mauro Ceruti, and others, today warn that we are called to understand the great complexity of the world, nature, and man. Thinking about the complexity of life phenomena at all levels is a challenge today. Similar to the metaphor of the labyrinth or the designation of mycelium and network in postmodern discourses at the end of the 20th century, which replaced the image of a vertical, developmental, and hierarchical tree, today the complexity of life phenomena is almost a fashionable label. At this point, however, we can look back to the Renaissance when man first became aware of the great complexity of living beings and the world in his spiritual development. The fashionable expression of this was the famous Rooms of Wonders, Wunderkammer, in which enlightened rulers and powerful people began to collect specimens of plants, animals, and objects from all over the world. They meant the beginning of museums, new classifications, as well as modern Wikipedias, which show everyone the physical wealth of our earth and the universe. How to live responsibly with this? Should having or being be in the foreground? The difference from Renaissance collectors today should be that we recognize that we are not masters of the world, but only manage it. That we coexist with other beings, and that, as the smartest, if that is what we are also responsible for all other beings, including the entire biosphere, earth, water, air. And in doing so, we are called to transcend European anthropocentrism after 500 years. I'm not saying that we should discard our own identity, but to transcend it wisely and responsibly. Contemporary conflicts in the world show the exact opposite. The Renaissance achieved its supreme creations in art and culture, and ultimately also in science and technology, through the successful interweaving of crafts, entrepreneurship, knowledge, selected also spiritual orders, and excellent artistic products. These were unique. This can be a good journey, a complex message, so to speak, for today. Let us preserve the value of individual crafts. Let us strive, even in our daily lives, for the quality of existence and the world of objects. Let us seek, even in the secular sphere, an appeal to the spiritual and aesthetic. Let us have a style. This makes us decent people. From our speech onwards, the Renaissance teaches. Today, we can rethink all the implications of the epistemological cut that led to the so-called scientific revolution. We did the small European continent overlook other civilizations. Within 2 or 3 generations, Copernicus, Vesalius, Galileo, Kepler, Descartes, and their companions, Mersenne, Bruno, Petrich, Bacon, Gassendi, a completely new world of understanding opened up, which, for better or worse, determined the modern era. What was suppressed and what remained outside this new image of the world? In a way, it's complexity. Man did discover new continents, geographically in the external world and also in his inner self, manifested by art and spirituality. But in order to dominate them, the external and internal world, he had to abandon the recognition of the lack of understanding of several complex components. These were pushed aside into the sphere of the irrational and primitive. Art and mysticism separated themselves from the new science. The latter very sharply defined its three fronts, in the distance from which it established itself, namely traditional old behavior, Aristotle, ideological interventions of the centers of social power, church, state, and the field of so-called pseudo-science, forms of naturalism. It was not prepared to admit its non-integrity in principle. The denial of the broad complexity of phenomena in society and nature leads to tyranny, political, but also aesthetic, ethically moral, and also rationally scientific. On a social level, this was expressed in the Enlightenment. Today, we are called to responsibly overcome these forms of rational tyranny. The world is richer than we think, as our rational mind thinks. With affirmative sovereignty, when I proudly declare that I know, and openly admit that I do not know, it makes sense to listen and take into account that sometimes I do not know that I really know something. And even more attentively to accept that it is very inappropriate to maintain a convinced position and not know that I do not know. The era of historical humanism and the Renaissance, which largely overlaps with the dynamics of the modern development of Western civilization, can be interesting and useful to us in another way, as a warning not to repeat the mistakes that our societies made in the past. Let us think of religious wars, the hegemony of political power, the conflict of ruling ideology, the currently unacceptable conquest-minded anthropocentrism. Let's turn Marx's 11 theses on Feuerbach, where the man with the gray beard in the Communist Manifesto gets angry at philosophers for only interpreting the world in many ways, but the point is to change it. Let's turn it around so that when we look at the Renaissance, we say, we don't always have to forcefully change the world. Let's try to understand it first. Thank you.
That was very interesting indeed. And with all our speakers, I noticed there's been some really memorable phrases. I just jotted down some phrases there. That phrase about the shifting perspective to look for planetary and cosmic man, phrase about the collective transformations of the imagination. Thought that was beautiful. And also, we are not masters of the world, but we only manage it. So I think so many memorable phrases there. And now we're going to look a bit more about the way in which it's so easy to get locked into boxes with rigid boundaries when we look at the world. We're going to talk about the need to pay attention, to refresh our spirits amid the daily tasks of caring for our machines. Now, this is an issue of deep interest for Dr. Luka Trebeznik. Luka's well known, of course, as lecturer and vice dean in the Faculty of Humanities here at Alma Mater. He also researches at the Institute for Philosophical and Religious Studies of the Science and Research Centre at Koper. He looks now at the future of Europe, not in terms of traditionally geography or GDP, but rather the fundamental question, what is its spiritual essence? Luca.
Yeah. Thank you, Howie, for this wonderful introduction, and thank you, Peter, for really putting all this together. It's an honor to be among such a distinguished thinkers and really established personnel. So here I'll try to introduce into our thinking about this possibility of new Renaissance a thought of Jan Patočka, important philosopher who was, you know, rarely that philosophy was thinking about Europe in 20th century because it can be dangerous. It's really, you know, if we try to establish what is special in Europe, then we are really close to some maybe, you know, even colonist argumentation. You know, it's really always finding for some superiority. So it's really problematic. But he reactualized this idea and adding to this, I would say, chauvinist, you know, interpretations of European dignity, a deep criticism of all tendencies towards appropriation and control. Here I have few quotes from him along the way on the slides. The contemporary world often speaks about renewal, technological revolutions, economic transformations, or cultural revitalization. Yet these forms of renewal rarely address the deeper crisis of meaning that characterizes modern civilization. The Czech philosopher offers a different perspective on what genuine renewal might require. His reflections on Europe, history, and responsibility suggest that any true Renaissance must begin not with innovation or prosperity, but with a renewal of the human capacity to live in truth. For Patočka, Europe is not primarily a geographical or political entity. It's a spiritual and philosophical project that began in ancient Greece. What defines Europe is the emergence of a way of life centered on questioning and responsibility. According to Patočka, European civilization begins with the discovery that human existence must examine itself. In this sense, the legacy of Socrates is foundational. Socrates represents the moment when life becomes conscious of itself as a problem, when individuals accept responsibility for seeking truth rather than relying on myth or authority. I'll go one back, maybe it's more appropriate. Yeah, sorry. Patočka describes this defining principle of European culture through the ancient philosophical idea of the care for the soul. The care for the soul is not a purely religious or private activity. It is an ethical orientation toward truth and responsibility. It means that individuals must constantly examine their actions, their beliefs, and the meaning of their lives. As Patočka writes, the care for the soul is what gave rise to Europe. So it's really profound, you know, simple but profound thesis. In other words, Europe's identity lies in the commitment to live in a way that takes truth and responsibility as a highest value. This commitment introduces a new kind of freedom into history. By abandoning mythological certainty, philosophical reflection opens human life to questioning and uncertainty. Yet this freedom also brings risk. Without unquestioned traditions to rely on, individuals and societies must constantly justify their actions and beliefs. The European project therefore contains an inherent tension. It demands freedom and responsibility at the same time. So even with Christianity, in Patočka's interpretation, it doesn't come to the replacement of this philosophical heritage, but deepening of it. So the Christian emphasis on conscience, sacrifice, and the dignity of the individual intensifies the ethical seriousness already present in Greek philosophy. The fusion of philosophical inquiry and moral responsibility creates a distinctive cultural trajectory. Europe becomes a civilization defined not merely by knowledge or power, but by the demand that human beings live responsibly in the face of truth. However, then 20th century came, yeah, the period in which Patočka lived. So it's really just a semblance of some faraway past. And he argues that modern Europe has largely abandoned this original orientation, beginning with the rise of modern science and the technological transformation of society. Reason gradually becomes instrumental. Knowledge is increasingly valued for its ability to control and manipulate the world rather than for its role in the search for meaning. Modern civilization achieves unprecedented levels of technical efficiency, for sure, but this success comes at a cost. The deeper question of existence, questions of meaning, responsibility, and truth are pushed aside. This development leads to what Patočka describes as a crisis of meaning. Modern society becomes highly organized and productive, yet it struggles to justify the purposes for which its power is used. Technological progress does not automatically produce moral or spiritual progress. Instead, it can create a form of nihilism in which human life is governed by systems of efficiency and control. So just to check, yeah. Systems of, yeah, rather than any meaningful goals. In Patočka's words, modern civilization increasingly becomes a civilization of mobilization, in which everything is organized for performance and production. So the catastrophic events of the 20th century reveal the dangers inherent in this transformation. For Patočka, the world wars demonstrate how technological rationality can become detached from ethical responsibility. Industrial societies mobilize their entire populations and resources. It's really high level of mobilization. Everything is put into this goal. But the goal is destruction on a previously unimaginable scale. The very civilization that once championed philosophical responsibility becomes capable of unprecedented violence. In this sense, the wars represent not merely political conflicts, but a profound spiritual failure. Yet Patočka does not conclude that renewal is impossible. On the contrary, he suggests that the experience of historical catastrophe can produce a new form of solidarity. In one of his most famous ideas, he speaks of the solidarity of the shaken. The phrase refers to those individuals who have been profoundly shaken by the collapse of familiar certainties, by war, frontal experience of First World War. He talks especially about this, but any oppression or historical tragedy can be the cause of this shakenness. Having experienced the fragility of human existence, they recognize the need for deeper responsibility. Patočka writes that the solidarity of the shaken is capable of understanding what life and death are all about. So it's a sort of liminal existence, which is, you know, coming from face-to-face experience with death, or you know, some huge catastrophe and so on. Those who have confronted the limits of human power may develop a renewed commitment to truth and responsibility. This solidarity does not arise from ideology or political programs. It arises from a shared recognition of vulnerability and moral seriousness. In this sense, the possibility of renewal emerges precisely from the awareness of crisis. So this, if we interpret these insights in contemporary terms, Patočka's philosophy offers a framework for thinking about a new renaissance. Such a renaissance would differ fundamentally from the technological or economic revivals often discussed today. It would begin with a renewed emphasis on the care for the soul. This is, again, the cultivation of critical reflection, ethical responsibility, and the courage to pursue truth. Education would play a crucial role, sure, as we heard already today a few times, in this process. Instead of focusing exclusively on technical competence and economic productivity, educational institution would aim to form individuals capable of independent judgment. Philosophy, history, and the humanities would regain their central importance because they cultivate precisely the capacities required for responsible freedom. A renaissance, in this sense, would involve the restoration of intellectual seriousness, and public dialogue about fundamental questions. At the same time, Patočka's perspective suggests that societies must reconsider their relationship with technology and power. This is crucial today. So it comes as a given, but it's really, something that should be heavily criticized. Technological development should not be rejected, of course, but it must be guided by ethical reflection. We heard also this simple thesis today. A civilization that measures success solely in terms of efficiency and growth risks losing sight of the deeper purposes that make human life meaningful. The challenge is therefore to reintegrate technological progress with moral responsibility. Finally, to conclude, Patočka's vision emphasizes the importance of courage and sacrifice. Even sacrifice is a lost, I won't say virtue, but it's really, today, it hasn't got a meaning in itself, but it's really to give up something, not just to getting hold on things. So it's living in truth is rarely comfortable. That's the essence of the whole thing. It's got some negative aspects. It requires individuals to resist social pressures, political power, or economic incentives that encourage conformity. Patočka himself exemplified this principle through his involvement in the Czech dissident movement and his support for the Human Rights Initiative Charter 77, which consequently led to his death. But his life and death, for that matter, therefore demonstrate that philosophical ideas can become practical commitments. A new renaissance inspired by Patočka would therefore not simply revive past achievements. Instead, it would renew the fundamental insight that human life must be oriented toward truth and responsibility. In a world increasingly dominated by technological systems and global crises, this insight may be more necessary than ever. As Patočka reminds us, the future of civilization ultimately depends not on its power or wealth. So Europe practically cannot even compete in this regard, but on its willingness to care for the soul and to lead by example, to live in the light of truth. So this is simple, maybe impulse of philosopher who experienced, coming from Eastern Europe, experienced a really lack of European spirit in his totalitarian, let's call, political environment. But it's a really profound insight that Europe has a dignity, and it's an idea that's worth, surviving or supporting. So this is just my small contribution. Thank you for your attention. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you indeed, Luca. Again, some wonderful phrases there.
Are we going to apply any of the Socratic method in this meeting?
Within the next 5 minutes, I promise. The solidarity of the shaken was a very fascinating phrase, and the Socratic method will come because we're about to have a discussion. And I'd like to ask Professor Klaus Meintzer, who's with us online, just to make a couple of comments. He's the president of the European Academy of Sciences and Arts, and I think I see him somewhere there.
Yeah. Yes.
You're shaking your head, but you'll have a chance in a moment, I promise. Promise.
Okay, now unmuted and you can understand. Yesterday already I started with the introductory talk with remarks on Renaissance, and I will not repeat that because all aspects of European Renaissance were discussed by the other speakers. There is one point I want to underline, namely, actually now the great challenge of Europe to make it short and to bring it to the point is Europe's sovereignty. Europe's sovereignty. Europe is under pressure. Europe is no longer in the center of the world. Of course, all these amazing developments in technology and in culture and in law, all that started more or less here in Europe since Renaissance, but nowadays we are under pressure. We are living in a multi-centered world, not only two centers such as in the Cold World, but multi-centered are emerging, and we live in a time of wars. We live in a time of conflict, very, very dangerous. It reminds me of the time just before the beginning of the First World War. And so the question is, what about sovereignty of Europe? And at one side, there is a technical challenge, and it can be illustrated with the challenges of AI that was also mentioned. But here I want to underline, it is not ChatGPT. Most people think that ChatGPT is AI. No. ChatGPT is 3 years old. That is generative AI, and that concerns our communication. No, the very important AI, which is nowadays dominating our civilization, is the so-called physical AI. We are not communicating with this AI. This AI is hidden in our infrastructures. This AI is hidden in the drones. This is the foundation of the cyber attacks and things like that. And that means these are special chips which are hidden in the infrastructure. And most people are not aware of that, but we are already dominated by that. And our industrial infrastructure already depends on that. That is one challenge. But of course, we know that this kind of technology is mainly driven nowadays forward in the United States and in China. So it seems to be there is no chance for us. The three on coming Monday and Tuesday, we will have at the Technical University of Munich a conference about supercomputing. And the background is that the first 3 fastest computers in the world are in the United States, the exascale computers, and there is one first European exascale computer, supercomputer, the 4th one in the world in Jülich now. That means in Europe. And there is another good message, namely that AI Factory is also now here in Europe, in Munich. And so there is some hope. But the challenge is to find a connection with the education of the people, to help to keep people here in Europe, the young people, which are best educated. And that brings me to the point which you also highlighted in your contributions, namely education. And especially here, the what is traditionally called the liberal arts or the humanities. And we know nowadays, we can observe that, at least in my country, in Germany, that was actually a center of humanities and liberal arts. But nowadays, the students are breaking down. Most students are nowadays studying either technical disciplines or economics. Now, what about the liberal arts for the future? My idea is it must be integrated in the modern technologies, in the education of the economists, in the education of the engineers. They must make experience with the necessity of the value systems, legal system, very concretely. What about what about laws nowadays? And an engineer, he must make experience very concretely with the law, or economist. If there are rules in the markets, if there are laws in the markets, then that is an economic and technical benefit because there is reliance. People can rely in these markets because there are rules. Otherwise, uncontrolled markets, and we are running into a completely uncontrolled world. You know, there is no longer people's law or international law in the world, and that is a great danger. Now coming back to education. People must be educated in this direction in an integrated way. It makes no sense, such as in the tradition, to have the people who like humanities and philosophy and history, and they do their stuff, and there are the others, the engineers. No, it must be integrated in the our education, and that would underline the importance of the humanities, of the liberal arts for our culture. And by that, by the way, the politicians who are responsible in the educational systems, in the ministries, they would also convinced that this kind of integrated liberal arts with the natural sciences and engineering sciences is necessary. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Klaus. And now we're very keen to get you to join us now. I was kind of delaying the questioning so that we would get a good head of steam, and we need you to lead the way.
So I wanted to start with the Socratic issue. Socrates proposed that to fulfill the journey of life, one needs a knowledge of the soul. And he proposed a method of acquiring that related to virtue. In fact, he said they're coterminous in some ways. If you break it down, he emphasizes the pursuit of virtue as the transformative aspect from which gnosis arises. The scholar that you pointed out proposes that out of trauma, out of crisis, somehow gnosis will arise. And that's not what happens. In crisis, the amygdala is stimulated, the fear is stimulated. Fear leads to divisiveness in societies, and that's what authoritarians have always commerced in. Socrates, on the other hand, emphasized this transformative of consciousness, and even went so far as to be critical of the emerging technology of knowledge of his time called literature, and emphasized that the process of dialectic and dialogue was a means of it, not reading and writing. So this parallel between how do we acquire virtue and meaningful knowledge in a time of an emerging technology that is challenging the capacity of people to even have any time to think, this epistemological domination of social media, for example, which is so attractive, is if there ever was an embodiment of the chains of the cave, it is social media. So I wanted to just emphasize that I was with you 100% until you proposed his proposal, because I believe Socrates, my experience is Socrates is completely correct and on point and incredibly relevant today. And when you mentioned sacrifice, my God, he said, give me the hemlock. I'm free, and I'm going to give up my life for the meaning of helping the community, the ultimate sacrifice, knowingly doing that. And when I was at his cell, which is right next to the big pageantry culture, and I was there, I was at a conference consultation with the foreign ministry on nuclear policy. And I had a day with my wife and we went, and I said, we have to go there. And there was nobody there, and the sun was shining, and I was praying how grateful I was to be there and what he had done for my life, that allowing me to live in a free society with the rule of law. And there was rain, a sun shower, no clouds. And when I finished, there was this very old man sitting on a bench. My wife and I sat down next to him, and he said, how can I help you? I'm the oldest man in Athens. I was a shipping captain, and I've been to almost every country in the world. I speak over 30 languages. How can I help you? I said, please tell me something of wisdom. Now, when I was praying, the thought came to me, this, what Socrates did for all of us, they should have that reenacted for all the tourists instead of showing them the statues and so forth. And he turned to me and he said, 30 years ago, another couple came here and they too understood why this place is so important. Isn't that wonderful? That if 4 people could get it, that's enough for transformation. And I thought, when you were speaking, I was thinking of what that wise man told me.
Thank you. Wonderful.
That's beautiful. Absolutely
Supplement.
beautiful. Luca, would you like to
short reply. Yeah. I didn't stress enough how scandalous was this Patočka's account. He was heavily criticized for glorification of the front and so on, but he was in the way really wondering how the miraculous conversion can happen, this metanoia that joins Greek philosophy and evangelical thinking. It's really how the change of heart can appear, and he more than claimed that this would happen after the First World War, but he hoped that such a transformative experience may cause maybe even collective metanoia of a sort. But I'm here with you. It's really the fear, the shock, but maybe Socrates was also a bit on this shocking, disturbing side. It's really he was leading people outside of the comfort zone and so on. So it's really more as a recipe to conversion, a hope of Patočka's that this would happen. And he was heavily disappointed that it didn't. After First World War, the Second World came, and then after that, it didn't end. The Cold War is just another shape of continuation of the wars, and they can go on and on. It's the quest for the impossible in a way, how to change the convictions, how to convert, which reorientate, it's really, so yeah, thank you.
Socrates puts it on each of us, and this wise man said, don't think about this as a sociological phenomena or a political phenomena. I had the privilege of giving a keynote speech on Gandhi at the Gates Foundation with Bill Gates right here. And so I did a deep dive into his metanoia. And his point was that he was pursuing liberation of his soul, and that he discovered that compassion and nonviolence internally was necessary for his consciousness to be able to perceive beyond the material plane. And then he said that he came upon his strategy of ahimsa and satyagraha, or soul power and social change, not as a strategy for politics, but as an integrity for himself, that he had to do that in order to fulfill his personal journey. Now, that is something that is not taught in the academy, the personal transformation in order to know truth. We have operationalized truth discovery in an epistemological tyranny of reductionism, where Socrates calls us to a higher kind of knowledge. And I saw this in its most tangible aspect. I was in the general debates on the SDGs when I had a diplomatic posting, and I was there when we were producing the statement for the heads of state. And all of it was very much like her presentation, the technical value of fulfilling the SDGs, all of which I consider axiomatic for our future and virtuous. But when I went back to where I live, and tried to talk to my neighbors about the SDGs, it meant nothing to them. Until I posed it as a moral issue. Do you think you have a moral obligation to your grandchildren? And everybody said yes. And then I thought, well, we don't have an ethical articulation of that. And I came upon the idea of a golden rule for the 21st century. Treat the lives and well-being of future generations as we want to be treated, and challenge the property paradigm, which allows the destruction, because if you own something, you can destroy it, the property paradigm of a relationship to the natural world. And when I approached that with my neighbors, do you think you have a moral obligation to your grandchildren? Everyone understands it. And then you can talk to them about how to get there. But the whole UN agenda and why it doesn't have popular support is it never explains the why. It has no telos, it's purely operational, and we are failing. The SDGs have no popular support because they're explained purely in technical language and not in moral language. And that's why I was here going, we need to explain the how we're talking about in terms that normal people can feel that they have a chip in the game.
We have two, Samuel
Yes.
and then Peter.
Yeah, I'm with you with Socrates, but Jan Patočka actually here is an issue on Husserl. Patočka was Heidegger's student in Heidegger, in Freiburg, and you know Heidegger had two things: to deny Plato because he destroyed Western metaphysics and we have to start again. And he says the technology that is going to devour us, destroy. That's where Patočka comes from. So what you are saying, talking to your neighbor about their grandchildren, that's absolutely fine. But along the way is this train of technology running. And you can talk on the top of the hill how we are responsible, where the train can anytime derail or just run away. And that's the issue of today. Where education comes in, that we hope that train driver or that who produces the train will hopefully have the liberal arts education, that he or she can be responsible for their grandchildren. Because those people who are producing those trains, those supercomputers that we heard in Munich in America, they don't give a damn about morality. They don't give a damn about their grandchildren. Many of them want to survive themselves as they are putting their heads into the ice water to survive. So these are the parallel things. What Patočka talks about, the care for the soul, but also with the baggage of his teacher Heidegger, who says technology is going to devour us. And how to reconcile the two? That's the question.
May I make a remark just
Yes.
to the last comment, because you mentioned supercomputing again, concerning now the competition between Europe and the United States. And I mentioned place 4 for Europe, the supercomputer. And you can say, like in Olympic Games, place 4 is nice. But of course, we want to be the first places. Now, the good message is the following, and that has to do with the ethical debate and the debate on values. There is a place 4 with the supercomputer in Jülich as the fastest computer. But if you consider the question, who is the most energetically efficient computer, and by that, a computer which is considering the Green Deal of Europe, then this computer has place 1. And perhaps you know there is also a scaling, not brutally the fastest computer, but the aspect who is the most efficient, energetically efficient computer with respect to environment. And there is the so-called JD computer, which is a part of the Jupiter computer in Jülich. And this computer has place 1. So I mentioned that because we are here on the way, or can be on the way in Europe, to demonstrate we can both. We can supercomputing on a high level in competition with the United States, but we are also considering our European values. And that is, for example, sustainability and Green Deal. That is what I want to highlight before with the integration. The values must not be abstract, metaphysical debates separated from technology, but they may be integrated. That was, by the way, the original ideas of the SDGs of the United Nations. They want to highlight these values of humanistic values must be integrated in our technological, in our economic development, in our civilization, in a very concrete way. And that must be trained in education to our young economists and politicians and engineers.
I'll take that one. Just 2 sentences. I think Peter will ask you here. I was deeply touched by the previous speakers and the intervention of Mr. Granov, because I think that it's important to talk about the technological development and the perspectives and the threats and the, everything of that. But I think the advantage or the beauty of the new Renaissance is actually the individual level. So values and virtues are individual, can become collective, but let's stress that it is going back to the human being as individual, who is very creative. And the parabola you actually offered to us about talking with your neighbors, with common people, ordinary people, I think we should ask the same question, the decision makers, the politicians, because they are also fathers, husbands, and all this. So the question should be put on the individual level. So that's why I think that the categories like compassion and sacrifice are the basic things. And the basic question that each politician should be questioned many times, or decision makers that is responsible, especially in the geopolitical big powers, is what kind of responsible compassion do you have for your children? I mean, we could ask now the decision makers in Israel, do you have some compassion for your children, for your grandchildren? What will their life be? What you are doing today will affect definitely them, or in Iran or Russia or wherever. This is the basic question. And that's why this is the biggest strength, I think, of the new Renaissance. Going back to the basics, to the human values, to the virtues, and of course to the sins and to the evil. You mentioned the media, that they are the new framework, the new tyrants, so to say. So who is behind the media? Are not coming from nowhere. They are owners, they are editors, they are strategists working behind the media. Why media are behaving like that and saying good news is not a news? Good news should be a news, the big news, the most important news. So this is the real question, how the geopolitics works. And the new Renaissance will have to be courageous enough and to be bold enough to question the right questions. How we change the geopolitics, because it's always done by men, by human beings, not by machines, in order to come to the more, let's say, to the better, to the improved societies that are really worth of, a well-being, that are actually contributing to the well-being, to the improved well-being of the all citizens in the planet. Because it's not done by the artificial intelligence. The wars, the conflicts, the bad things are done by people, and they should be morally responsible for their deeds. And we are now trying to emphasize again the values and virtues that were actually so much discussed in Europe that we actually forgot a bit about them in their real daily life. And we should re-question the media. We should re-question the politicians. All should be reflected again in different mirror, how all these processes and decisions affect the ordinary life of the human being, of the citizen.
Yes. I would like to cite an original definition for sustainable development. And it came with the Brundtland report. Brundtland is was from Sweden. Our common future. This was United Nations World Commission on Environment and Development, released in 1987. Sustainable development is a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So all the reports and agendas like 2030 agenda, UN agenda are built on this definition, the concern for future generations.
Comes from Judge Montre's decision in the Danube River case. It's the first time you see it in law, which precedes Brundtland's articulation.
Yeah, but we use this.
But I understand. He was dealing with it in an actual situation.
Can you repeat that? Which one?
The Danube River case. There was an energy plant between
Slovakia.
We cannot hear you.
Microphone, the microphone.
There was a case of an energy plant between Slovakia and the Czech Republic, in Hungary, and one side said we have a fundamental irreducible right to development, and the other side said we have a fundamental irreducible right to a clean environment. And Judge Montre, who wrote the opinion, said, "Gosh, we have two irreducible rights here. What do I do?" And he said, "We need some wisdom." Can you imagine that? He used the word wisdom and said, we need to go to ancient traditions. So he analogized to the rice paddy husbandry in Sri Lanka, in which villages used the same rice paddies for thousands of years, and said, we can have development that's sustainable. And the court kept ongoing jurisdiction over that. The plant was created, and that was the first time in law that I could find the definition of sustainable development that was actually applied in a situation, by law. And it was Judge Montre, who also wrote a brilliant opinion for the ICJ on the legality of threat or use of nuclear weapons, in which he similarly goes back to wisdom traditions for the same reason, says for the great issues of humanity, the law must look to wisdom. And he cited the Ramayana in that. It was interesting. In the Ramayana, Lakshmana, who represents the intellect, comes to Ram and says, I have a weapon that can destroy all of our enemies. And Ram says, in the Ramayana, by ancient tradition, such weapons are prohibited. Wisdom. And that's what Judge Weeramontre cited, wisdom, as was necessary for the law. I thought that was brilliant.
Fascinating. Just to check on that date, Samuel, you'll be best placed. What do you think the date of that case would be? Late 70s.
Czechoslovakia has built this part, and Hungary refused. And then the trial took for 25 years, and then it went all the way to the 90s. So I don't know when this. So this was before. This was before. Yeah. This was before. Yeah.
I'm interested in the date because Jane King in Scotland, who's the daughter of Alexander King of the Club of Rome, Jane was one of the first users, and many people do say she was the first person to use this word, sustainable development. But I'm not sure about the date, so I'm going to ask her.
Maybe I misspoke. It was the first time it was used to apply it.
To apply it, yeah.
Apply it in the law. And also the case begins 1977. It doesn't get resolved for 20 years, So
but it's the fact that
The year Patočka died. How about that?
yeah, I can't even pronounce it. But the fact that it was applied, that it was applied in a situation, that's what this people.
We go. Well, this is what wonderful discussion. Thank you to all of you. This we could really carry on which for a while, but we've got more speakers to come and more stimulus, and delighted to see. Now I'm checking, and I think our next one is Mate, who's with us. I think he is. I'll just do an introduction, Mate, to you, and if I look at my piece of paper here, I've got various pieces of paper, and I've found them now. And Mate is going to pick up on something that actually came when that discussion came about Europe, when we were speaking about different countries and different political views and different interest groups. There was the way in which we all assert our right to speak out as individuals. But the fact is, when we speak, it's actually coming out of us. And what you said about social media was really excellent, because so often on social media, people speak as individuals and they come out collectively in the chains of social media, speaking about on behalf really of a particular group, giving us a narrower view of the world in the cave rather than the full view. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So the question is, how do we get, on the one hand, away from the individual selfish perspective to a bigger one without getting locked part way into a small group that we get stuck into like flies on fly paper? Well, Mate Makarovic is a professor of sociology and Dean of the Faculty of Information Studies in Novo Mesto. Since 2012, Mate, you've been the president of the National Committee for the Management of Social Transformations at the Slovenian National Commission for UNESCO. Mate, you're going to look at the way in which we can free ourselves from this trap by getting a bigger perspective.
Okay. Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. So yeah, I will try to condense quite some ideas and some research in the shortest possible forum, because I know that we are already running out of time, I think. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I would somehow focus on two major long-term trends that are like not completely, but at least to some extent also rooted in the like traditional historical Renaissance. Yeah, one is about individualization, the other is about universalism. So by individualization, we actually typically see about seeing a person as more than just a part of a collective, recognizing the uniqueness, the individual autonomy, which is linked to a variety of other like historical trend, like increased specialization, division of labor, gradual increasing emphasis on individual freedoms and rights. On the other hand, yeah, we have another very relevant trend. In sociology, it was somehow first systematically debated by the famous American sociologist Tucker Parsons. It's about the trend of universalism, yeah, universalism versus particularism, yeah. So which would actually somehow, to put it simply, mean applying the same norms, rights, principles to everybody, yeah. So like ancient Romans, yeah, they were famous for the Roman law, yeah, but they still like adhered to this saying, yeah, about it, what is allowed to Jupiter, it's not allowed to a cow, yeah, which implies a certain kind of like, if the rules are not, or ox, yeah, yeah. So it somehow depends on like different hierarchies. Rules do not apply to everybody. And yes, from these times we have passed for a long way to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, yeah, which has now recently also been expanded beyond humanity, yeah, to nature and specific like natural entities, yeah, including animals, rivers, and and so for trees, of course. Yeah. So yeah, both living and non-living entities in a way. Yeah, or like combination of living entities. Yeah, in a way, because in certain ways, many things function as like a kind of collective organisms. Yeah, in a way. And then like if we go slightly back to individualization, maybe you will remember this saying, which is actually a little bit, to be honest and fair, taken out of context. It was like former British Prime Minister, there is no such thing as society. Yeah, and of course, to be fair, it was taken out of context, but still it somehow represented a spirit of certain times. Yeah, times of like excessive individualism, the rise of neoliberalism. Yeah, which actually, yes, got quite some significant consequences. But now it seems that this is now followed by a varieties of a kind of anti-individualist backlash. Yeah. So, like maybe just to illustrate that with a few examples. Yeah, there was like a study like by Grant based on Google Ngram. Yeah. He noted, yeah, how like in English literature, yeah, for the last 200 years, we had the increasing relative frequency of concepts like individual, self, unique, yeah, for the 200 years, but then we have a decline of that for the last 20 years, yeah. In popular culture, yeah, again, if you remember the 1980s, yeah, the character like Rambo, yeah, like you have like a one-man army, yeah, yeah. But now is the time of the Avengers, yeah. Hero. For example, a hero. So even if you are a superhero, you cannot act as individual, yeah. You need to act as a collective, yeah. So going beyond this kind of individualist approach, and we can observe some similar trends also, like in politics, for instance, from human rights movements that were typically focused on individual human rights, yeah. We have shifted a little, quite significantly to like so-called identity politics. Yeah, for example, like emphasizing collective identity of oppressed groups. Yeah, like remember Black Lives Matter or LGBT plus. So it's not about a right of an individual, but like the identity of the oppressed group. Yeah, and you have like in a way similar trend also on the political right, yeah, with the rise of excessive nationalism, rise of racism, misogyny, which can again be as collective men as collective against collective women, for example, yeah. So this kind of quest for identity, and this it can be also confirmed through like cross-national social survey with persisting or increasing significance of collective belongings. And maybe just to mention like a few cases, a few studies, like we have this theory of generations by Strauss and Howe for the United States, emphasizing this kind of collectivist shift based on generational dynamic. Then we can have like by Breschon for France, the decline of utilitarian egoistic individualism, but still rise of individual autonomy in France, mostly based on social service. We can note studies about post-individualist turn in Central Europe by Sadowski, for example, and we have also like did some studying about that in Slovenia, focusing on the issue of reflexivity, especially autonomous reflexivity, which seems to be in decline. About like we are less likely to claim that we make decisions by ourselves, yeah, without consulting the others, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so this kind of human tendency to belong, it is not just a practical issue, like benefiting from solidarity. It also has like very basic, like psychological features derived from our primate nature. We are social animals, definitely. But of course, the problem, belonging, for which we are biologically programmed, always implies this crucial distinction between us and them. Yeah. Of course, we have been capable to broaden this notion of us. Yeah, we were able to move from a herd, yeah, from a clan, from a tribe, from village to like city, nation, civilization. Yeah, but there is still always the other. Yeah, no matter how we expand, yeah, this kind of belonging, yeah, there is the other. Yeah. So, and this actually calls for more universalism, yeah, in terms of like expanding the norms, the rights, the principles that we demand for us to the increasing range of others. So maybe if we go like back to like the history of philosophy, and also like maybe somehow late Renaissance, early Enlightenment, Hugo Grotius, for example, and his contribution to international law and law of warfare. So I would here very much emphasize his claim that in an abstract sense, actually, we form a common moral community even with the enemy. Yeah? This is like what Pete Hexet is calling today the stupid rules of engagement. Yeah, but this is something that is very, very basic. Yeah, for the survival of humanity today. And so the ways forward, and here we will actually somehow also link to planetary consciousness mentioned before. So on the one hand, yes, definitely this kind of reaffirmation of community is imminent. Yeah? And of course, it does not necessarily mean that we deny individual rights and freedom. So again, we can mention Breschon and his distinction between like being having like solidarity, being connected to community, but still emphasizing individual community, tolerance, and so on and so on. Yeah. However, yeah, if this community is defined too narrowly and based on othering, it will still lead to destruction. First, based on the clashes between peoples, which we can see now today in this kind of increasingly violent world, and also obviously, yes, in unsustainable relationship towards our natural environment. So potential solution, as actually mentioned before, so I'm happy that we are quite in line in that, yes, can be of course seen in what we see like a planet-centered awareness, in planetary consciousness, as a kind of new source of collective belonging. So, because this is important in two ways. First, to overcome the emphasis on societal divisions between us and them, because we are somehow including the humanity, but it also replaces the unsustainable anthropocentric understanding of nature, yeah, being at our disposal, like being for our mastery, that's what also mentioned before, yeah, and to replace it with us being not just managing nature, yeah, but actually being constituent part of nature, yeah, with obviously the responsibilities that rest on us because of our intelligence, yeah, because we are still among the more intelligent creatures, yeah. So we have definitely some particular responsibility with that. But of course, when we talk about these kind of perspectives, we should somehow keep in mind that it is an issue of heart and an issue of mind. Yeah. So definitely human attachments, and that also includes planetary consciousness, planetary awareness, and so on. There are actually more emotional than rational. So any kind of strong belonging definitely must somehow be based on resounding stories, narratives, myths, and so on. So planetary consciousness, yeah, is impossible without it. So yeah, some see inspiration around old indigenous beliefs in like different perceptions of natural unity that can be derived from some Eastern traditions, Eastern religions, philosophies. Some may try to imagine new stories about it. But on the other hand, we should also be aware that over-reliance on spiritual, religious aspects of that, yeah, may also lead to dogmaticism and fanaticism, which is not something that we need in this kind of very complex and very dynamic social situation. So we need somehow to balance the beliefs, the stories, the myths, yeah, with critical reflexivity. as what this is here we draw upon a British sociologist Margaret Archer, yeah, her concept of reflexivity as an inner deliberation, yeah, which also is related to like social deliberations, yeah. So we need to constantly be engaged in dialogue with ourselves inside as individuals and with others, yeah, to apply abstract principles of being a part of Earth to a broader variety of practical issues. And so that is where I would see, together with my colleagues, like the idea of the new Renaissance. So that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mate. And indeed, this shift in perspective to a planetary one is so powerful. Powerful in how we see ourselves in relation to our fellow humans and also to the natural world. And there are direct practical consequences, as our next speaker highlights. Rachel Armstrong is Professor of Regenerative Architecture at Belgium's oldest university, KU Leuven. She's also a Fellow of the European Academy of Microbiology. Rachel brings together ecology, technology, and design to create a field that she calls living architecture. And she argues for a new relationship between us as humans and the world of microbes, which are all around us, but also within us. She says we should open up our perception to see ourselves as an expanded human. And I'm hoping all is well and the online connection is working and Rachel is with us right there. I see her there. Rachel, warm welcome.
Thank you. Could I have a first slide, please? I'm going to have to do this the old way and shout, next slide, please.
Rachel Armstrong.
I'll just wait till the slide's up and then I'll start speaking. Fantastic. Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Could I have the next slide, please? It's a real privilege to explore with you, esteemed colleagues, what a new Renaissance might look like. And certainly, in my view, when I think of a Renaissance, I'm often thinking about the rebirth of classical values, humanism, reason, and the celebration of human potential. And in this presentation, I want to suggest that our 21st century Renaissance requires us to take the next step, not just to deepen humanism and reflect on it, but to expand it, to extend our sense of self, our values, and our economies, to include the vibrant, invisible majority of life on Earth, the microbial realm. Next slide, please. The great challenge of our time is a crisis of relationship. The industrial mindset, for all its achievements, treated the material world as an inert and humanity as separate from it. We've built systems of extraction and control that have led us to the climate emergency. To move towards a wisdom-driven society, we need a new mythos of matter, one that recognizes its vitality, its agency, and its deep entanglement with our own lives. Next slide, please. This begins not with the Vitruvian man, but with reimagining the human. We are not discrete, bounded individuals. Biologically, we are holobionts, integrated communities of human and microbial cells. Our genetics, our metabolisms, our very development are shaped by negotiations with the bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live on and in us. This is the expanded human, an ecological being whose boundaries are porous and whose health is a product of symbiosis. This isn't a diminished view of humanity, it's an enriched one. It reveals that our life world is built on collaboration, not isolation. Next slide, please. This new understanding fundamentally challenges our modern ideals of health and hygiene. The 20th century model was a form of warfare, antimicrobial agents, sterility, and the eradication of the microbial other. But if we are holobionts, then hygiene as warfare is a form of self-harm. A wisdom-driven approach to hygiene is one of care. It means gardening our internal and domestic microbiomes. It means understanding that our homes are not sterile boxes, but unique ecosystems. By shifting from a logic of extermination to one of cultivation, we can create living spaces that are not just less toxic, but actively regenerative. Next slide, please. This isn't just a theory. This is actually something I'm doing in practice. And when we actually embark on this shift, it leads to values that can build a new kind of economy. Of course, the word economy, as my esteemed colleagues will know already, comes from the Greek oikonomia, or economia, the management of the household. What if we took that literally? What if our homes become productive ecological nodes and not just points of consumption? The microbial platforms I've developed with my colleagues, like this installation here called Living Architecture, and the one that I'm currently working on called Microbial Hydroponics, explore exactly this. These are EU-funded projects. In these systems, the waste from our households, urine, grey water, even feces, becomes the feedstock for microbial communities. These microbes in turn generate bioelectricity, clean the water, and produce valuable biomolecules. The cycle of consumption and waste is replaced by a cycle of resource and renewal. The slide that you're looking at, really, you get the sense of the scale of it with the researcher that's standing in front of it. What you're looking at is a series of different kinds of bioprocessors that are taking model household waste and turning it into all these renewable resources so that the infrastructure of our homes is a kind of resource circularity with its own value, with its own oikonomia or economia. So next slide, please. So here the values of the expanded human take tangible form. The old economy was based on extraction and disposal. This new economy is based on reciprocity and participation. Every member of the community of life, from the electrogenic bacteria in a fuel cell to the fungi supporting a plant's root, has value. Their work is recognized and integrated into our own. By participating in these cycles, using AI, by feeding our waste to a microbial garden, we're not just managing resources, we are enacting a new set of relationships. We are learning to care for the systems that care for us. Next slide, please. So what is the promise of this new renaissance? It's not a return to a pre-industrial past, nor a blind faith in a high-tech future. It is a wisdom-driven path that uses the best of our knowledge, from evolutionary biology to natural computing to design with life, and not just upon it. Think of this. The artificial intelligence that we build into these systems is like an extended sensory nervous system and an extended intelligence where we're able to converse with microbes. You think of all the scales and the layers of difficulty that stand between us and having a conversation with a microbe. That is actually one of the wonderful things that the responsible use of AI can really help us better understand, so that we can immerse ourselves in an extended reality, the extended human in an extended reality, going beyond the spaces that our natural senses are able to make sense of, and really challenging our own minds and our own sense of value to really start to generate the appropriate responses to this amazing new realms that we now have access to. And I think this extends the humanist tradition of valuing the individual to valuing the entangled ecological self. Both are possible. It extends our ethics of care to the microbes that make our planet habitable. It extends our economy from a linear throughput to a circular participation in planetary cycles. Last slide, please. This is the work of the expanded human. to recognize that our dignity, our health, and our prosperity are inseparable from the dignity, health, and prosperity of the entire living world. In embracing our entanglement, we do not become less. We become part of something wiser, larger, and infinitely more resilient. We become more active, more cognizant, and become positive contributors to the living planet. And these are just examples, just the first kinds of explorations into how the infrastructure of our houses might start to look. Whilst the wrapping, the thing that architects get most excited about, the beautiful aesthetics and the way that our indoor spaces are arranged are actually just the veneer of something even more wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Just one brief follow-up question, because you opened up so many interesting things there. We tend to hear about sustainability and climate change and economics and survival in macroscopic terms, very much as things that are big and that the governments coordinate and that we all slot into. Your image is more like our home around us, as almost a sphere of survival, almost like a survival capsule. Would that be a fair picture?
I think that's a wonderful insight, Howie. I would refer to the brilliant words of an economist, Umer Haq. And he really changed my perspective about thinking of what he called the age of collapse. He was asking, why does the world seem to be just going so crazy? Everything seems to be falling down around our ears. What might the cause be? And what he said was that we have taken the tiny, weakest things on the planet for granted. Right. He said that when we look around, what the cause of the collapse is, that we have exploited systems to such an extent that the things that we haven't given value to, like microbes, like plants, like the poor, like the vulnerable, they have withered to the point where the middle layer starts to fall through. We start to notice, and then finally the upper layers fall through. And with that insight, it just helped me understand that if we start with the tiny soft things, the tiny little things that we actually stand a chance of intervening with and supporting and changing our own personal value spheres to be able to engage differently with, then maybe there's another story for what it means to be human in this century, or even in this millennium, could be. So that was the start of the journey. So you're absolutely right, starting with a home, because that is something deeply personal, where you can express your value systems. And as yet, the big industrial kind of organizations have not yet commodified the home to such a degree. They have made us dependent on externalities like utilities. So if we can bring those utilities under our own sphere through our regenerative technologies, then we stand a chance of being able to say no. At the moment, we are over a barrel with all these, demands made on the rent of everything. There's no commons left anymore, not even information is free. There's no shared space. Everything is commodified. But if we can do that within our homes, we have a basic resilience, a basic robustness, and the capacity to be able to say no to things that our value systems come up against. And then from that basis, then we can start to think about economy, community, who we care for, who our family is, who we are, all those kinds of things that go along with that. Anyway, so fantastic. Thank you for that question.
Oh, thank you very, very much indeed, Rachel. And we're going to continue online and following up at the way we look afresh at the role of humans in the world, because as we've been hearing, it's happened before, amazingly so, and it was the basis of the Renaissance 500 years ago. Sometimes we today look simply at the richness of the art produced in that time and think of what happened as the product of prosperity. But in fact, it happened at a time when the situation for Europe looked about as harsh as it does today. There was war, a climate downturn, illness, the Black Death, epidemics, poverty, famine, and a fatalistic belief that humans were condemned to suffer as a result of Adam's sin. But then came the new picture that humans could rise as well as fall, and that led to a transformation of thought. Our next speaker, Dr. Raffaella Santi, comes from the home of the Renaissance in Italy, and she's from the University of Urbino Carlo, Bo, which was founded actually at that time, and there she is an associate professor of the history of philosophy in the Department of Humanities. Raffaella has written on Renaissance and early modern philosophy for nearly 30 years and joins us now to tackle the question, what can we learn from the philosophy of that time?
Thank you very much, and thank you especially to Peter Bolasco, who was the founder of this whole new Renaissance project, and thank you for inviting me in it. Since my English is getting really worse because I never practice, I thought it's better to show you some pictures and to focus on the values of the Renaissance time. And my thesis is that these values and virtues are very meaningful for us today, and particularly with reference to moral and political issues. And my thesis is that ethics must be the foundation of politics. Otherwise, we are lost. Okay, so that is my thesis. So next slide, please. I will do as Professor Armstrong. And as you can see here, it's a depiction of philosophy, the personification of philosophy, painted by Raphael. Raphael was born here in Urbino, and then he went to Rome, where he made his fortune, though he died young, unfortunately. This image of philosophy is just above the well-known School of Athens, depicting Plato, Aristotle, and the other philosophers of antiquity, meaning that the Renaissance was grounded on ancient philosophy. And as you can see here, philosophy holds two books, and one is natural philosophy and the other one is moral philosophy, meaning the two realms, the two fields which philosophy is about, the knowledge of nature, scientific knowledge, and science, as we could call it today, and moral philosophy, which is the study of man, the inner, the inside of man. So man as a psychological and moral agent as well. And next slide, please. And here you can see the two of the doors in the Bodleian Library of Oxford, Schola Naturalis and Schola Moralis Philosophiae. And of these two ways, these two doors, we will take the second one, and we will see how moral philosophy and the values of the Renaissance can still be meaningful for us today. So next slide, please. And we are back to Italy. And this is the dawn of the Renaissance, is the Italian Trecento, the century of Petrarch, Dante, Boccaccio, and also is a century that initiates the Renaissance. So this is Palazzo Pubblico. These frescoes are well known to the historian of arts and also to political philosophers, but not so known as they should be, because they give us a glimpse into the very nature of politics and of men. Here you can see the good government. So it's the central figure is the personalization of the Comune of Siena. Siena was a city republic, And above, you can see the three theological virtues floating: faith, charity, and hope. And at the bottom, you can see the other virtues: peace, fortitude. This is the right one: peace, fortitude, prudence, and then magnanimity, temperance, and justice. Wisdom is also present, but it's not in this picture here. And is crowning justice, another representation of justice, distributive justice. And this is the symbol of a good policy, of a good government, which is guided by virtues. And I want to highlight pax, peace, resting peacefully, and justice. So peace and justice, but also the other virtues, are basically the values that a good politician should embrace. And the next slide, please. And here we see the other side of what could become of a city. So this is the bad government. You can see at the center of the picture is tyranny. Okay, so tyranny and justice is not operating here, and tyranny is surrounded by vices, above avarice, pride, vainglory, and at the bottom, cruelty, deceit, fraud. You can see a goat. A goat is a symbol of lust. And then fury, division, and war. So peace and justice with the good government, and war and cruelty. The fresco is ruined, but cruelty, it's a woman holding a child, and she's torturing the child with a snake. So it's the lowest level of human when you harm a child. Okay, so it's what is the meaning of these frescoes? If you follow the virtues, you can have a good government and the city flourishes. If you forget the virtues and follow the vices, if you activate the amygdala and not the frontal cortex, so if you don't follow reason, then that's what you have. You have a city governed by a tyrant. So this is a very powerful image. Next slide, please. Yeah. And this is Correggio. So we are now at the very middle of the Renaissance. And these are two pictures depicted for Isabella d'Este, who was a powerful and very erudite woman. And she wanted these pictures to be in her studiolo, her place for study. And you can see the allegories of virtue, sapience, especially wisdom on your left, and vice on your right. And here, with the allegory of wisdom, you have the realm of justice. You can see the gladium justitiae, the sword of justice, held by one of the virtues, and also, again, the theological virtues above. And on the other side, you have the realm of passion dominated by lust and by the other vices. And so next slide, please. And that's the last slide. And I'm happy because we finish with Socrates and crates of Thebes. This is in Siena too. So not in the Palazzo Pubblico, but in the cathedral, in the Duomo of Siena. And it's the floor, the pavement, a sort of mosaic painted by, the cartoon was prepared by Pinturicchio, and then Mannucci realized physically the floor. and it's the hill of wisdom. It's a very meaningful and powerful vision of what wisdom is. You can see the hill of wisdom, 10 wise men trying to get to the top. At the bottom on the right, you can see fortune with a feet in a ball and another one in a boat. So fortune is not stable, okay, and life is made of fortune also, but it's also made of choices. And so the 10 wise men chose to go up to the hill. And there are, of course, perils like snakes at the bottom. So the snake is a very symbol of evil. And at the top of the hill, at the center, you find wisdom, the personification of wisdom. And at your left, Socrates, and at your right, crates of Thebes. And Socrates, of course, for the reasons you said before, the care of the soul, the invention of dialectic and dialogue. By the way, yesterday someone said in the plenary session that one of the main tasks of dealing with artificial intelligence is how to ask questions. So we are back to Socrates, who invented the right way to ask questions, and which is more important than get answers in philosophy. And so the palm of wisdom goes to Socrates, and the book is given to Crates or Crates. I think it's Crates. And Crates is throwing away all the gold, jewels, riches, and the meaning is not that we should be poor, we should be without money to live. The meaning is that these riches can be very damaging, can be a peril for our very nature, can bring us to vice and we could forget virtue. So it's important not to rely on riches, but to rely on ourselves as human beings. And of course, I close this presentation with a hope. Hope is theological, a theological virtue with the hope, but it's also, what is more human, perhaps, because without hope we are lost. And I have hope that something in the actual situation could change at the international level, and that we could have good governments and not bad ones. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Raffaella, and indeed we echo that. And I should say that I did notice in the room here, when you showed that image of bad government, there was definitely a peering and a looking of those faces very carefully. And I think all round the table, everybody was thinking about faces they've seen sometimes on the news bulletins and wondering how similar some of those could look. And indeed, with our next speaker, we're going to continue now to build on that image, on those issues of war and peace. Donato Kiniger Pasilli comes from Florence in Italy, and he studied political science before working as a journalist. Then nearly 40 years ago, he joined the United Nations in New York as economic affairs officer, and he served in the UN system ever since. His areas of duty have ranged from disaster assessment and peacekeeping to post-conflict stabilization. Donato is also vice president of the World Academy of Art and Science. Now, this was established in 1960 by a group of thinkers, including Robert Oppenheimer, who was a core figure in the Manhattan Project. The aim of developing the World Academy was to provide a forum where the really big issues facing humanity today, whether spiritual or physical, could be discussed. And Donato's joining us now, and I have some questions to ask you, but Donato, but I know you had something to say. Give us some background about your work first of all.
Thank you. I think we limit ourselves to the present and not to what we did 40 years ago. But I think yesterday we had a very long conversation with four speakers, among others, our president here, Jonathan, who was the keynote speech. So I wanted to have your attention, and therefore I think now we will not really re-enter about the peace offensive as a whole, but I want to project again. I projected again the image that served me to introduce the subject. These three caravels in a rising squall. From I'm not the chauvinist after all, even if I'm Italian. This is from Peter Bruegel the Elder, 1560, in engraving. And there is a metaphor of an unpredictable journey. So where are we now? Are we already in the eye of the storm or not? I don't think so, but we are definitely heading towards this at a certain speed. So this is why I find this image really telling, because it shows all the risks that these caravels are going to encounter in a very short while. Heavy winds, shallow waters, the hidden rocks, all the perils that we are confronted with nowadays. And therefore, this reminds us also of the elements of nature. So it's not just war, but nature. I mean, the peace and nature, or with nature, that we have to consider. By the way, one element that I didn't attract attention to yesterday is, you see at the bottom to the right, that is the myth of Arion. And Arion was a son of Poseidon. And he was, out of this disaster that occurred ultimately, he was saved by the dolphins. So he was, and this is, you see the dolphins right at the bottom. So all this allegory, this metaphor, was for one purpose. It took me some time to search through the in my library, but I finally did it. I mean, and I think this is particularly telling because of that. Now, the question is, into the present times, what are we doing? The peace offensive is a new model at sea, in a sense. It's a way that we are confronting the risks, the imminent risks, the existential risks of humanity with a new cooperative approach, with a trust-building approach, with also a tension reduction methodology, gradual tension reduction. So this is what we have put in place, also thanks to the Alma Mater, to the European Academy of Arts and Science, and of course the World Academy that I do represent. And this system is gaining some grounds lately. I'm proud to see that others are also speaking on behalf of my theoretical approach, and is now becoming somehow, a new venture, I would say, a new venture, and others are embracing. And I feel that this journey is very long, but it represents, a way to obviously face the polarization, the violence that we have nowadays, and the need to change human relations. The need to change human relations, reverse the direction through, as I said, tension reduction, reconciliation, collaboration, enhancing human security, because human security is the basic needs of people, what people really value, and therefore building bridges to facilitate dialogue. It's a long process. I want to stop here. I prefer to get your questions rather than talk, because I like your idea of having this conversation, not a presentation.
Well, it's a lovely point, and it's the perfect point to ask you, because I was just thinking back, as I'm sure you would be thinking back to, say, 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, when people used to sit around tables and actually talk to each other. And I wondered, do you think in the world today we've lost the art of negotiation?
I don't know if we lost the art of negotiation, but we are hiding it. So it's someplace in a drawer. And the fact is that at least apparently, those who are governing us, they prefer the deal-making approach, the real estate dealing. I give you something, you give me something in exchange, I'm trying to get a discount. But in the end, trading. But, if it was healthy trading, it would be good. But unfortunately, it's not that healthy for humanity, because we know that this journey that we are describing here is a long journey that requires people to change their mentality, and you cannot do it with a stroke of a pen. It's not a matter of signing. It's never been actually a matter of signing agreement. The agreement comes at the end of the process, or it can at least promote a change of mentality, promote a change of, but the accords are something very solid, it happened even in the recent past, if we say the Dayton Agreement or the, have been difficult to craft. It's always a matter of crafting. But if we lose the arts, we cannot craft anything anymore. Do you agree?
Yes, and I was going to ask you too about the role of the media and the social media, because do you think that the media feed on emotions, almost that we can get information so easily now online, but we can't always get things to whip us up into anger or sentiment? Do you think that the media and social media are actually inflaming the situation internationally and making it worse?
Definitely. It's one of the high risks that we have nowadays. I mean, we spoke about artificial intelligence, exasperation of artificial intelligence, I would say. But the fact, as we heard yesterday from students, that they naturally confess, they said most of our news is from social media. Most of the things we learn is no longer reading a book, reading a newspaper, reading different magazines and comparing facts and figures and comparing opinions, etc. That's why I said, when I concluded my session yesterday, saying critical thinking is the only thing that can really promote an improvement in your own mind, first of all. I mean, never take things for granted. Consider options. Consider that, you never have to go with the wind again. You have to tack, at some point, if you want to reach a destination, no? You are an experienced sailor, so I know I'm talking to someone that understands me in full.
And one question just to round off, and we'll have time for some discussion after. My final question is there anything that we could do better, whether individually or collectively, to help the cause of peace?
Yes, there is a lot we can do if we reappropriate ourselves of this sense of intimate consciousness that is something we have naturally. It's a genuine wisdom. We used the word wisdom before. But the fact is that there is this tendency of flattening ourselves down, and saying, I accept reality. This is reality. They're waving this flag. Why shouldn't we wave the same flag? But the fact is that you have to understand the issues first. So I repeat, for me, the curiosity, the elements of the new renaissance that we're trying to propose are essential. The arts and artifacts that we can create with our own mind, our own creativity first, not accepting a final product if we can do it ourselves. So the product is a combination of factors, and this combination of factors comes from other people's experience, but also our own experience. And we cannot jump to conclusions. The tendency nowadays is it's much easier to jump to conclusions and say, I am a partisan of this group rather than another. because it's a self-defense mechanism, but it doesn't really ensure you to have a place in history, for sure, not even in in your own history. So I mean, the fact is that you have to know that there is a certain trajectory that we need to follow. Again, if you want to make sense of our presence here in this planet, as you said.
Donato, thank you very much. Just you could sit on there because our final speaker's actually online.
Yes,
so
good.
you can stay there. And something I just want to say as we introduce our final speaker, I think it's quite remarkable this afternoon that speakers from so many varied backgrounds are converging on a single concept, that the crisis in Europe, in Western society, in the whole world, is pointing us to a fundamental transformation in the way we think. The very success of the ideas of science and the machines of technology have trapped us into ever-narrowing perspectives. There's a feeling in the air we're heading for a civilizational breakdown. But the message coming through is we've been here before. The whole of modern Western civilization developed from a similar time of breakdown 5 centuries ago. We made a shift then in how we see ourselves. It opened up new horizons, and the signs are pointing to the need to do this again, which means to heal, to repair, to rebuild, to renew. And we round off with some examples of that process in the world of art, with some images to take away with us as we think after the event. Jane Addams, who's originally from the UK, has lived in Tuscany for more than 30 years. She's been involved in organising and funding a range of art restoration projects, and particularly of women artists of the Renaissance. She is founder of the charity Artemisia Gold, which is dedicated to the work. And now here's an opportunity to sit back and enjoy some examples and images and the story of rediscovery, restoration, and renewal.
Hello, and thank you all for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I wish I was there with you, but thank you. I, again, like the other women, need to have your help, if you may, with the slides. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so I'm taking you right back to the Renaissance, right back to Florence, to some colour, some beauty and goodness. So yes, I'm Jane Addams, founder of the charity Artemisia Gold, a UK charity that just this year has also become an American charity. We are dedicated to the rediscovery and the rediscovery, restoration and research on art by forgotten female artists. This we do through research, exhibition and education, bringing these artists' works back to life, but also their stories. We're reviving, in fact, the other half of the Renaissance, the hidden side of the Renaissance, because we know there were many great male artists, figures of the Renaissance, but not many people really talk about the women. They were largely overlooked or actually written out of history. So our goal is to create a new legacy for future generations and fill in some gaps in history. So the Renaissance began in Florence in the 14th century. It was very much, it became a period of remarkable culture and intellectual revival that later spread across Europe. Inspired by the rediscovery of classical antiquity, artists and scholars explored human potential, scientific observation, and new techniques. Florence became one of the most important cultural centers in history, thanks largely to the support of the powerful patrons such as the Medici family, who funded artists, scholars, churches, and education. One towering figure you can see here, David, down there on the left, the statue by Michelangelo. Not just a sculptor, he was a painter, architect, and created works of extraordinary power and detail. He later painted, as we saw earlier, the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican between 1508 and 1512. Another great Renaissance master, top left, Sandro Botticelli, known for elegant, symbolic paintings inspired by mythological figures and classical literature. Works such as The Birth of Venus and Spring show his graceful figures, following flowing movement and refined detail. Many of these works were commissioned by the Medicis, who encouraged artists to explore classical themes, nature, and humanistic ideals. Next slide, please. The Last Supper, Leonardo. Another iconic figure was Leonardo da Vinci, often described as the ultimate Renaissance man. He was not only a painter, he was a scientist, engineer, and inventor. His paintings include the Mona Lisa and this Last Supper. They're admired for their realism and groundbreaking techniques, such as sfumato, which creates soft transitions between colors and tones. His notebooks also reveal extraordinary curiosity about anatomy, flight, engineering, and the natural world, reflecting the Renaissance spirit of exploration and discovery. While Leonardo's Last Supper is probably the most famous in the world, the subject itself was extremely popular in monasteries and convents throughout Italy, where such images were often painted in the dining halls where the religious communities gathered for their meals. Next slide, please. Behind many Renaissance artistic achievements stood the powerful Medici family, the banking dynasty that ruled Florence for much of that period. Figures such as Cosimo de' Medici and Lorenzo de' Medici were major patrons of that moment. They were patrons of art, architecture, and also scholarships. Through their support, the churches, libraries, schools, and artists developed. Among the contributions was also the development of the Dominican convent and library of San Marco. San Marco is where Platelinelli, first female artist of Florence, was in her female convent attached to that complex, the convent, the nuns in Santa Caterina da Siena, which the building doesn't exist anymore, but it was just on the left to the major. You see the main church. Her convent was to the left. It was destroyed in the 1800s. San Marco was associated to some of the greats from the Renaissance period, such as Savonarola, who called for moral reform in Florence. Earlier, the convent had been home also to the painter Fra Angelico, whose frescoes were designed to inspire meditation. Another artist connected to San Marco was Fra Bartolomeo, known for combining strong religious expression with the balanced composition typical of the High Renaissance. Although women had fewer opportunities to train as artists during the Renaissance, some still made remarkable contributions. One of these examples is Suor Platelinelli, a Dominican nun who entered her convent, Santa Caterina, when she was just 14, and she became the first recognized female artist of Florence. Largely self-taught, using the drawings inherited by Fra Bartolomeo, she established a workshop inside the convent and taught other nuns how to paint. They developed a thriving workshop, and during her life, she also served as the prioress in that convent 3 times. I first encountered her when in 2014, I started working for another American charity, Advancing Women Artists Foundation, and together in 10 years, we restored over 80 works of art by female artists, and that is just in Florence. That we also did involved not just restoration, but also several conferences, exhibitions, publications, and documentaries. The Last Supper was restored and unveiled in 2019. You can actually see it today in the church museum complex of Santa Maria Novella. It is life-size. It measures 2 meters by 7 meters. It was probably accomplished not just by her, but also some of the other nuns in her convent. Advancing Women Artists Foundation closed sadly in 2019 due to the founder Jane Fortune's sad passing. And from there, we spoke about individual missions earlier. I carried on Jane Fortune's mission, which she really, really handed down to me, and created Artemisia Gold. Since then, I've been striving to carry on the mission. Next slide, please.
Maybe we should show not the notes, but just the pictures. Thank
that
you.
wasn't, that's not meant to be there. There should be another slide. No, no, that's not the right one. Oh gosh. No, that's not the right one, I'm afraid. I think I've managed to send you the wrong one. Shall I just, I can either send you, what, is this the one that I sent to Peter or the one that I sent to the group?
To me, yeah, to me. Tell us anyway. Tell
Oh
us.
gosh, well no, because it's so visual. I don't need you to read these unless you want to.
It's no drama, but maybe you can tell us now without further
Go
ado.
through. I think maybe if we just go up to the Last Supper then, and then I would just tell you what I've done since then. So I'm really sorry. I think this I got muddled up with the one that I sent your colleagues. So going back to the Last Supper, yes, Platilinelli. I continued restoring works by Platilinelli. We then went on to be engaged in, and I'm sorry you can't see it, but a wonderful painting by Artemisia Gentileschi down in Rome, which was in dire need of restoration. We accomplished that in 2021 during COVID. We were lucky to actually, the Church of San Carlo al Corso, we were actually able to create the restoration studio in the church. So we were able to stop and really engage the public, and also university students came and got close to the painting, but also were able to ask the restorers the process, what was happening, etc. That restoration also involved a diagnostic campaign, so we could see the underdrawing of the painting and the different pentimenti, the changes that Artemisia made. Following that restoration, again in Rome, we were invited to participate in another painting by Artemisia at the Spada Gallery, her mother and child painting, which is one of two paintings owned by the Spada Gallery. They also own her Santa Cecilia. Both of these paintings, we undertook scientific campaign to really get below the painting under the surface to see her under sketches and also any changes to the composition that were made. And that in 2023 gave fruit to a very interesting publication called Investigating Artemisia. Following on 2024, going back to Plautilla, and I will get these slides to you, I'm sorry. We restored a very large altarpiece by Plautilla, her Madonna of the Rosary, just outside of Florence. This painting was again undertaken, the restoration by Florentine restorer Rossella Ladi, who is the hand of Plautilla. She's literally done, I would imagine now, over 20 restorations works by Plautilla. She was the one who actually helped us curate the exhibition Platilinelli at the Uffizi in 2017. Next, another painting by Plautilla, again in 2024, belonging to a private collection in Florence, was restored, and this was part of the 500 year celebrations of her birthday year. She was born in 1524. So we restored, as I say, two paintings by Plautilla. We also participated in several talks, lectures, all over the world. We were invited to London to talk about Plautilla, to Trinity College Dublin, to the Dutch Institute, to Utrecht, as well as Palazzo Corsini, Santa Maria Novella, and also San Marco. We took her home and had a lovely conference in San Marco. I then wanted to just end with a comment and something that I think is, well, you will all appreciate the book, the work of Giorgio Vasari, first art historian, writer, artist, architect of Florence. And he speaks about her in his book, The Lives of the Artist. He says, talking about her, she could have done great things if only she'd been able to study like a man. That obviously he's referring to the fact that being a woman she wasn't able to study anatomy or have any formal training. So I will leave that thought with you and would like to say that I think she did great things, and we'll hope to see you in Florence and maybe see some flotillas together. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane. In fact, we were just thinking this would be an opportunity afterwards. You've really whetted our appetites now with the description of some of those images. And if it would be possible to circulate or send the Peter could circulate the images after. But it's okay, because I think in some ways it's almost nice to build up our anticipation to enjoy them afterwards. And we liked what we saw.
Florence, and we can go and see them all.
Oh, it's really good. And it's these images of rediscovery, renewal, restoration are exactly the perfect imagery, the perfect metaphor for the whole quest for a new Renaissance. And I'd just like, before we do some thanks, I think I get the feeling in the room that there's one or two questions that people would like to answer, or points for discussion. So possibly, and actually, of course, online as well, you're most welcome to join us. Let me look around the room and see if there's a question coming up or a comment. Andras, you have the look of somebody who's going to ask a question. I can tell. You've got it there.
Thank you. Well, actually, I had a question about presentation long before that Peter was talking about, and was the Renaissance. What is the new Renaissance just a mirror of the past, or how can you use it in the future to solve the problems in the future? And this is the question for Professor Scamperle.
New Renaissance is not just a mirror of the past, but it would like to be the guidance or the lighthouse for the future on 4 levels. The reflection of the human being, human community, the society, nature, planetarian nature, and the reflection of the highest purpose of the human being, the search for the sense-making to all other things. Also, the historical Renaissance did not repeat the antique issues or the antique processes, the views. But it really wanted to speak on the new level with new words, with the new expressions about the human being. Today we have problems which are different from the problems in the past. And we have to answer them now. And the original historical Renaissance can be a good inspiration and motivation for finding the right answers today. And the challenges are, of course, great, as you know. One of them is also how to self-restrain the human being in this present moment. Not in a regressive way, but in the view, in the frame of the planetarian community society. again on all four levels: human nature, so on.
We've time for two more questions before rounding off. And I actually have one going right back to Daria's talk at the start. There was a very important word that she said, Mondragon, and this is the community cooperatives in Spain. And it did seem to me that when we talk about changes in perception and about action, we often speak about action on a large scale, whether it's national or in the world of ideas, as if the ideas trickle down to the people, but sometimes ideas can rise up from the people. And the example of the Mondragon cooperative movement in Spain is just remarkable. And I just wondered if there's a moment, just if you could briefly mention just the importance of it, Daria.
Yes, thank you very much. I had this incredible opportunity to work with several sustainable cases in Slovenia and to get to know these icons of integral development, economic development around the world. Mondragon Cooperative has been established based on Christian social philosophers. Has been initiated, established by a Christian priest, Azaimendi, in Spain. And okay, here we have in this book, Integral Development, a description how his thought has developed. But basically, he tried to initiate, to promote transition from individual values to community values, supreme human values, as he called them, such as cooperation, solidarity, and mutual support. He worked very hard, studied a lot, also European philosophers, and then started with a small industrial cooperative, because Mondragon Corporation is enterprise that is based in industry and later established educational, financial institutions, and so on. So it has become so successful that is a leading cooperative, I think 80,000 members that are all cooperatively owning and managing the company. To achieve this, they have to learn how to do it, because it's not easy for each worker to participate in the management of a company. So there is a lot of education, of course, some these basic values that are followed, that are in the center of the model. For example, Lessem and Schiffer depicted this model with the center humanity at work. So it is very effective, very much intended at becoming successful in the in the environment of free market capitalism. However, they are successful in somehow employing some of the best scientists, technicians, and so on, managers who are all committed to these same values, and they are one of the leading innovative enterprises also in Spain. And they are considered, as I said, icon on a global level of cooperativism, also very appreciated, with several cooperatives also in the States or in other countries, not only in Europe.
Super, thank you. And Samuel wants to come in with a point there.
Yeah, well, a different point. Unfortunately, Mate is not here but he was talking about how the culture from individually moves to kind of a universal. And then my long reading back, which something I was struggling with, that what the modernity is start losing is individual responsibility. And if you don't have a responsibility, so you can hide it in the collective. And virtue, responsibility is always in this, has to start individual. And if you have it in kind of a collectivity, then you don't have to be responsible. And I think this is a very important one. Maybe we can discuss it with Ludwig's over good Ludwig's wine later on, because Mate is not here. But this is a very important point, that however when we talk about virtue, when we talk about Socrates, it always comes from an individual and inspiring the others to, but it's a repetition. It's not a fluid thing as the Avengers or something that collective exists. And this concept of lost concept of, rights are killing and dominating everything, but rights without responsibility, it's really a very, very, very dangerous, almost at the precipice. If everybody's asking for human rights, then economic rights, and me, without providing that. And then so I thought it would be good to talk to Mate, but I don't know whether as a sociologist how he would talk. But I think we could discuss that loss of responsibility might be responsible for that universalism, which sounds very good, but I am not sure that it's something.
I think that's really key to understanding one of the things that happened in the Renaissance and the Reformation was the rejection that the only way to salvation was through the Catholic Church, and that was the intermediary. And the big insight was, no, you're responsible as an individual and you have agency. And then you have a very important legal, philosophical genius named Hugo de Grotius, who in the Peace of Nations argues, I want to demonstrate that when there's freedom of contract amongst free individuals, that justice and balance occur in the world. That's a divine attribute. And I want to explain that the marketplace can be equidistant to God as the monastery. And he, in a sense, makes commerce a divine activity because it gives you freedom and moral agency. That's the big plus on it, in my opinion. But we can't just deify this transformation, because at the same time, in 1600, the East Indies Company gets created and generates massive slave trade. And in 1621, right down the road from where Grotius was, in Middelburg, he was in Rotterdam, in Middelburg, you have the West Indies Company going and enslaving much of Southeast Asia. And so there's an arrogance that happens here, and a racism and a Eurocentric attitude that because we have overturned this oppressive regime of the Holy Roman Empire, we have something special and we have a right to property of the world. And where does this property concept come from? The property concept comes from the need, as de Groot articulated and others at the time, that in order to have moral agency, you have to have freedom. Otherwise, you don't have choice. And part of moral agency is the quest for salvation. And if you don't have freedom, you don't have choice, and therefore you can't get saved. So you have to have capital. And the individual then has a right to property. And this property right with Grotius becomes a sacred right. Property becomes sacred, and you can literally own people. That's how extensive this becomes. I think this is the problem of our time, this attitude of property toward the natural world. So property, I have a house, right? And I can burn it down if I want to. It's mine. That's part of one of the aspects of property. I can rent it, I can sell it, I can change it. but I don't have a duty to keep it going. And in the United States, the legatees of the absolute property rights people, the Southern plantation owners, have an attitude of property to the global commons. They were the first major debt-ridden agribusiness in the United States. That's why they had to keep expanding, because the crops they did were cotton and sugar. And their attitude is, and they'll say it, if you listen to the fundamentalists of the South, property rights come from God. Human rights come from the les droits des hommes. It's something we create. All of us here, I believe, presume property is something we create, and that the rights of the person come from God, are sacred. The person has a sacredness. They have a different equation. You have to understand why they think they do and why they operate the way they do. That's why I'm proposing a golden rule for the 21st century that says we cannot have a property relationship to the regenerative processes of nature. That's the secret sauce of it. That if we have a moral obligation to future generations, we can't use up the house of the planet. But I'm not publicly explaining that. But that's really what to me, that's what it's about. And all of this goes to this reformation of Europe in between like maybe 1560 and 1650, in this 100-year period. All these ideas take root institutionally.
And if we think of the world not as dead things, dead particles, but as something alive, as Alfred North Whitehead would say, and as many indigenous people would say, that gives us the kind of additional theoretical underpinning for what you've said so excellently.
One sentence. When the boats were moving from Netherlands and England, Martin Luther came. And he did this, what you were, what Catholic Church did. But look, you go Martin Luther, and then you go to Calvin, and you lose freedom because there is no the predestination. So it's an interesting theological development of the similar thing. And without freedom, which was so strong in your, not perhaps the Southern Baptist, although it might have been, it was also related.
They define freedom as absolute freedom of property. That's why they're against taxes and why they're destroying the federal government of my country. They think this is a virtuous thing to do because the bureaucracy that has labor rights, civil rights, environmental rights is curtailing their absolute property right. And that's why they think we're evil.
No, but it's not deifying law.
No, they're deifying property.
Using law.
They don't go that deep, but however, strategically, they're very deep. They put their time into how to gain power. So Stephen Bannon, for example, has diligently studied Heidegger to understanding that Heidegger, in a Nietzschean way, that Heidegger reduces everything to phenomenological understanding. And so he has no constraint in manipulating consciousness. And Karp, who went to Haverford, who's the number 2 at Palantir, is the same way. They don't see, there's a denial of the sacred. That's the bottom line. I would like to share an experience that then you'll all have it. I was part of an interfaith initiative. This will be. I think that people will benefit from this, and you too. You don't have this experience, and I didn't until I had it. I was part of an interfaith initiative to put loving kindness and compassion ahead of all rites, rituals, practices, dogmas that separate us. And so we had religious leaders. I was part of doing this. Religious leaders go to the sacred places on the planet. And one of the participants in this was an indigenous Inuit from the North Pole. And he said, you've got to come to our sacred place. It's not enough to go to Rome or Jerusalem or Rishikesh, etc. You've got to come and see my place. So we had an expedition up above the polar ice cap, and I saw I saw hunks of ice the size of office buildings crashing into rivers that shouldn't be there. Billions of gallons of pure water that was under the ice for billions of years. And then they took us to this field where the stones in the field had been under 3 miles of ice 40 years ago. Now, in Western Pennsylvania, there are fields of granite boulders that came down from the Ice Age, and they're all the same. But here, because I don't know why, but there are little things and big things. And because of the mineral variation, they were like gems. They were beautiful, and they had various geometric shapes in them that just blew me away. I was like I was bedazzled by this, and it went as far as the eye could see. And I thought, my God, this is, in some ways, it's miraculous. It's exposing a beautiful something. And I picked up a bunch of these stones and put them in my jacket. And I got in the van going back to the base camp. And my conscience kicked in. Oh my God, I violated something sacred. I jumped out of the van and I ran to where I'd taken them to put them back. And as I was putting them back, I had the experience, oh my God, the physical, natural world is sacred. And that's the indigenous religious experience. For me, the sacred is formless and infinite, and the luminosity of the soul that animates human beings. But all of a sudden I said, that's what they're about. That is what's missing. We have no respect for the sacredness of the gift of the planet. And if we, it's implicit still in the worldview and the Renaissance painters. You see how they're trying to show you, look at how amazing the natural world is. And that to me is what is missing most predominantly in modernity. We're so fascinated by what we create instead of appreciating what's given to us. And all of the great artists of the Renaissance had that appreciation.
Absolutely. That is so well said. So well said. Well, Peter, you wanted to say something? No, because otherwise I think I'm amazed that it's 5 o'clock, because when we were talking about the planning, I was worrying, and I thought, will people flag after an hour or an hour and a half? And I actually get the feeling that you're all into the stride and could go on longer, but because of the time, we do need to round off. I think it's amazing, the quality of the discussion. It's kept us absolutely fascinated. Immense credit to all the presenters, because I thought the challenge of 9 minutes might be impossible, but my goodness, you've all responded wonderfully. Wonderful questions, comments, and I should also say, what tremendous hospitality from Alma Mater. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here. Absolutely. The technical support is so good, and the lunch is superb. And Ludwig, I'm delighted that you're here with us as well, honoring us with your presence. And we really appreciate the kindness of hospitality and the home that you give us all.
Thank you very much, distinguished guests, dear friend. On behalf of the Alma Mater, I would like to express welcome. As well, many thanks for your contribution. During those days, we have large discussions, about 50 round tables, 300 speakers are in the program. And it seems to me this very round table. Thank you, Peter Velasco, for initiative. Thank you, Donato, for help. Professor Samuel and Krenov, it's a great pleasure. Thank you, Chairman, today, to this conference. We are thinking how to publish. Everything is recorded, and we would prepare some overview and would ask you for your eventual additional thoughts. It seems to me it should be distributed as well broader in academic and as well actual life, especially among the universities. As Alma Mater was founded in fact and started as a pure charity for the local needs when some economic collapse and social has happened in the most underdeveloped part of Slovenia. But anyway, it grew up because it seems to me the vision of our colleagues, our professors, our friends around the world are really so, especially Professor Unger, from the beginning, president of the European Academy of Sciences and Art, he inspired a lot, and as well he offered moral support. So we have internationalized our activities. That was only the way to survive so far, and we are looking forward. Thank you for the future. We would invite you for the future conferences, thinking maybe another form of the communications as well. Today, the communication is much easier through the new technologies. Thank you.
Thank you.